Hey all, Wicked Deke here. Thanks for joining me for the video. Today we're taking a look at NHL players most likely to be traded at the midseason trade deadline, which is this February 26, 2019. And now if you're a hockey fan, you probably already know what goes on at these trade deadlines in the middle of the year. They're either incredibly exciting with a lot of well-known names that are moving, or nothing happens. And you see a lot of stiffs that you've never heard of that get traded. So I think this year we're going to see some good action. There are a couple of reasons for that. We have some teams coming up that have traditionally not been great. They finally made their move towards being decent, and they have a lot of ammo for trades in the form of draft picks and what have you. And then we have a lot of teams who are at the end of their runs. And so they have a lot of veterans that aren't performing as well as they would hope, but who could probably help a playoff team, or certainly going to be interest to a playoff team, and so are likely to be traded. So with this year, we're looking at something interesting. The two teams that really are probably going to be front and center at the trade deadline are Buffalo and Columbus. So Buffalo, everybody's talking about Colorado. You know, how lucky is Colorado that they have the Senators' first-round pick this year, because, of course, the Senators are very bad. It's a very good chance that pick could be the top overall pick, or certainly at least in the top four. So how painful could that possibly be for the Avs? Well, think about it. They traded for Matt Duchene, and he's going to leave this year as an unrestricted free agent. And they're also going to lose their pick, so they might miss out on Hughes or Kakko or whoever it is they happen to like. So if you're a Sens fan, well, the misery just keeps continuing. I don't even know what to tell you at this point. Your owner is horrible, and so is your GM. So Buffalo, they are in a very nice position. Obviously, they're playing better this year. Some of the talent's coming to fruition, and what they could really use, they're kind of at that point where they could use some key veterans to come in and make a difference, and they have the ammunition to make that happen. They hold 3 first-round picks. They're about $3.5 million under the salary cap, so they'll have to tweak their salary cap a little bit. They'll have to, maybe include some contracts or something going the other way. But you can see, where they're right there. They're getting ready to make that move, to bring in a couple of vets who can help them not only make the playoffs, but maybe make a run. And again, they're pretty primed for it. And then you look at Columbus. So Columbus, obviously, the world's greatest soap opera when it comes to hockey. We have Bob blowing his top, Panarin refusing to sign anything, notwithstanding the free vodka offer. And so Columbus is in a very bizarre situation where 2 of their best players don't want to be there, and they're going to leave at the end of the year. And Columbus keeps saying they're going to keep both Bob and Panarin and make a playoff run. But really, you're going to let those guys go and get nothing back for them. Now, of course, Columbus will get a little salary cap space, but man, that would be a huge loss, particularly Panarin. Here's a guy who's a proven sniper. What do you think teams would give up for him? I mean, if you consider Vegas gave up a first-round, second-round, and third-round pick for Thomas Tatar, who couldn't even hold the jock of Panarin, man, what could Columbus get for Panarin? It would be quite a bit, and probably some on-roster players right now that could help them out moving forward. So those 2 teams are going to be fascinating to watch. And then, of course, we have the teams at the bottom. They were also going to be, pretty interesting. The ones that come to mind immediately are the Kings, Chicago, and then, of course, the Flyers, the strange case of the Flyers. Whereas the Blackhawks and the Kings are just kind of old. Their core's gotten old and starting to become less effective, and they have salary cap problems. The Flyers have the bizarre situation where they're actually already been rebuilding for a while, and they have a lot of young players, and they just have a culture problem there. They got some serious issues, and if you watch their games, you can see why. A lot of their vets not really performing well, not really making the effort. They talk a good game afterward in the media, but boy, some serious disappointment there. In fact, let's start with one. My 10th most likely person to be moved, and that is the great, in his own mind, Jacob Voracek. What do we have in Jacob Voracek? We have a player signed to a $8 million plus a year salary, who Hextall saw as a first-line winger who would be offensively dominant. And we found that that's sometimes the case, but not really. More realistic, he's a second-line winger who can score a lot of assists, not a lot of goals. maybe 10, 15, 20 goals maximum. But he can pump up the assists. He's as many as 85 points in the season. And the next time Voracek plays defense, probably the first time. You can usually identify him in the Flyers' defensive zone. He's the guy that's kind of cruising about 2 strides behind the player he's supposed to be marking. He's awful, just awful. And so when you have all those young players coming up on the Flyers, it's not great to have a veteran who doesn't really make the effort. Now, mind you, he talks a good game afterwards, but oh man, during the game you watch him and whoo. But if there are teams out there that need scoring, they will often go to extraordinary lengths to try to add it. You just have to look at the Kings this past summer when they signed Kovalchuk to a contract. Even though he was 35, they still gave him $18 million over 3 years. Regretting it now, not so much because of Kovalchuk himself, but he just doesn't fit their system. And they, for some reason, hired a coach who seems to hate Russians. But that's a story for another time. So Voracek, now, is he likely to be traded this deadline? I'd like to think so, but probably not. He'd probably be a summer trade, and the reason being salary cap. Who's going to be able to fit $8 million into the cap right now? Not a lot of teams, but look for it in the summer. Number 9, Mr. Carter, Jeff Carter. Now you may have visions of Jeff Carter screaming down the ice and whipping wristers past goalies. And it was a beautiful vision. It helped the Kings to 2 cups. But that Jeff Carter, he has vanished. This year's Jeff Carter is turnover prone, still kind of quick, but not particularly fast. And the wrist shot has abandoned him. I believe he has 7 goals this year, and we are at around the 45 to 48 game mark. So yeah, he's kind of vanished a bit. So it's going to be interesting to see if teams are really all that interested in him. Now there is something interesting with his contract, however. Carter's contract was signed under the former CBA, so it was one of those long contracts that were front-loaded. So he has a cap hit of $5.25 million for the next 3 years. The contract lasts 3 years. However, he's actually only due $7 million over those 3 years. And so the question is, if he is traded to someplace that he doesn't want to go, will he instead retire? And there's a chance that would happen. Carter is currently living with his family and his kids on the beach in California. So the thought of him going to Winnipeg to freeze his tuchus off, or more importantly, his wife going, seems fairly remote. Wayne Simmons, back to the Flyers. Kind of the ultimate physical forward you want if you're going to be in the West and you're going to go up against, let's say the Jets. Well, you need somebody to deal with Mr. Buff. Simmons could be that player. Only problem with Simmons, he's an unrestricted free agent after this year, so I don't know how much he's going to bring back to the Flyers. He's also got a ton of wear and tear. Love him as a player, but the guy is beat up. By the end of last year, he was just a mess, and it kind of shows in his play this year. But this might be kind of the typical player that if you get him onto a playoff team where the intensity picks up and there's more on the line, he may play really well. So expect the Flyers to move Simmons. Zuccarello with the Rangers, the Zuccarino. As we all know, Zook's kind of that pesty, fiery guy. He's the perfect kind of player that a playoff team needs. Somebody to come in. He's not going to score a ton, but he can get out there and cause a ruckus, annoy the heck out of the opposing team's best players. And given the Rangers are openly rebuilding and have actually played better this year than one would expect, Zuccarello at 31 seems a likely choice to go out the door. And it's kind of too bad because he's a good guy. He's gone through a lot. Had serious head injury that caused memory loss and things of that sort. So hopefully it works out for him. Would like to see him pick up a cup. Now, number 6. This is going to be a little surprise for some people. Tyler Toffoli. So Toffoli is a wing with the Kings, but he's only 26 years old. This is a guy who scored up to 31 goals in a season before. And he is, like all the Kings this year, he's been poor. His shooting percentage is 5.4%. It's usually much closer to 11 over his career. And he has scored, I believe, six goals so far. He's getting a ton of chances, but he just has not been able to put it in the net. He's one of those guys that's just snake bit. And I think teams are going to look at him and they're going to consider Tanner Pearson, who was his wingmate, if you will. They had the 70s line in LA with Pearson and Carter and Toffoli, and they used to dominate. And this year they just fell apart, well, including part of last year as well. they're just not producing. But you look at Tanner Pearson, he got off the Kings, he went to Pittsburgh, and maybe playing with a more talented cast. He's now got 8 goals, and he's got quite a few assists, and he's playing really well. You see his confidence is back, and he's enjoying the game. I bet a lot of teams look at Toffoli that way. Why would the Kings be willing to trade Toffoli? He's in the he has a bridge contract now, and next year is the last year. He's getting $4.6 million, and the question for the Kings is this somebody they want to sign long term? Toffoli is not a all-around player. He tries, he makes the effort, and what have you. But this is a guy that needs help to score. He needs somebody that's providing him the puck. He's not fast. He's not quick. But if he gets into the scoring zone and you get the puck on his stick, he can slam it home. Well, usually, except for this year. And so do you really want to, how much money do you want to give this guy? Because I think we all know next year being a contract year, he'll probably score 40 goals and then he'll want $9 million or something a year. And the Kings, are just getting out of salary cap hell now. I'm not sure they want to jump right back into it, particularly with a player who might, the year after getting his contract, go back to scoring, 10 to 15 goals a year. So the Kings may be looking to move him, and they also think they can probably get a lot back for him. And at this point, with the Kings, their prospect list is awful, and they desperately need picks and players coming up. They've, gave away all their first-round picks in the Dean Lombardi era, while they were still trying to, pick up cups, still claiming the window is open. And then Rob Blake has come in as GM, and his first-round pick, Gabe Velarde, who was a massive talent, has suffered a brutal back injury and may never play. He's in fact not playing this year. He's not even on skates. It's that bad. The Kings prospect list is thin, and so you could see them moving him. And that leads us to number 5, Muzzin. Jake Muzzin, as previously mentioned, he's a defender for the Kings. He's actually been their best defender this year, even better than Doughty. Doughty had a very rough beginning to the year because he was trying to do too much. But Muzzin's a real catch. He's got another year on his contract. He's getting paid $4 million a year, so it's very reasonable. And he'd just be perfect for a team that needs a defenseman that they can count on, penalty kill. He can play a little power play. Muzzin does not look good. He's not one of those players that looks great, but he does the job. And he produces the points, and he produces, on the defensive end. He blocks shots. He'll keep his man from scoring. He's good enough that when the Kings bring up rookies, they often pair them with Muzzin, because Muzzin can cover them and teach them how to play the game. And Muzzin would bring back a lot to the Kings, so they're pretty interested in moving him. Then we get to the contract players, and these are the ones you've all heard about and you all know, just because of their contract situation. We have, the Senators. Although I have them in a different order. Let's just see the Senators first. Duchesne, Stone, neither has signed a contract. Both have mumbled a little bit about, I like playing here, but it looks like both are gone. And the Sens are going nowhere anyways, so why wouldn't they trade them? They need picks. If they're going to try and do a youth movement, if that's, what they're pitching now to their poor fan base, then they need to move these guys. And if they get lucky, maybe they can move one and stick Ryan's contract, with the team as well. But, probably not, because that contract is just so awful. Stone, Duchesne, out the door they go, and let's see what they can get back. I mean, it's just obvious. And then you have Columbus with Panarin and with, of course, Bob Roski. Now, Bob, I know goalies aren't traded in the middle of the season very much. There's a lot of reasons for that. It's difficult to get acclimated. It might not be a good mix once you get them on the ice. You just have to look at Ryan Miller being traded to St. Louis years ago when he came over from Buffalo, and everybody thought, wow, St. Louis finally has a goalie. They're going to win the cup. And then Miller was not good in the playoffs. He just obviously wasn't comfortable, and didn't agree with the system, and had some issues with some of those defenders where they just weren't meshing, and it just went badly. And so you would think that goalies wouldn't be traded all that often, but I think with Bob at this point, based on the fact that he's being suspended for quitting in the middle of games, and I think it's pretty obvious that this relationship is finished. And so you could definitely see Bob being gone if they get any kind of decent offer. Panarin, again, how can you let this guy go out the door without getting something back? This guy's a sniper. He consistently scores. Chicago, they were ludicrous for trading him. I understand they had to do it for cap reasons, but Man, what a loss. This guy is a stud. And it sounds like he wants the big lights, wants to be in a big city, doesn't want to be out in the middle of nowhere. And so doesn't sound like he's going to resign, no matter how much free vodka he gets offered. And if he leaves for nothing, that's not a good day for Columbus, because that's not a player you easily replace with a trade or a draft pick. I mean, where are you going to go find somebody? And it also sets, kind of a difficult precedent for Columbus, that they'll let people walk. Of course, trading them does as well, but kind of is what it is. So Columbus is saying they're going to keep them both, and they're going to ride them through the playoffs to hockey glory, and they're going to lift the cup, and both players will see the light and sign long-term contracts in Columbus. And if you believe that, I have the cliched bridge I'd like to sell you. Just don't see it happen. Bob's obviously gone, and Panarin is trying to be nice about it, but it sounds like for all the world he's gone too. So they really should trade them. I mean, they just have to. They can't let them walk for nothing. That would just be insane. But reasonable minds can disagree. I think what we can say is at least this is going to be an interesting trade deadline. There have been quite a few in the past that have fallen flat, but it looks like there's some pretty big names that are available this time, realistically, and teams are motivated to make moves. It's going to be a buyer's market, looks like. So it should be fascinating. And then the other thing to keep in mind is the trade deadline this summer, or the trades that'll be happening this summer once the salary cap is kind of freed up a bit for a lot of these teams, and they start rebudgeting. You can see some really big names move this summer. People like Jonathan Quick, not because he's playing badly for the Kings, but the Kings have two goalies behind him who are high quality and ready to play. They've played temporarily in the NHL, and they've been, outstanding. And so you can see Quick traded back to the East Coast where he's originally from, maybe the Islanders, maybe Buffalo, something like that, as well as Chicago maybe making some big moves. You can see Duncan Keith maybe on the move, players like that. And of course, Edmonton will have to see what strange and bizarre moves they make. I'm sure they can go find a washed up power forward somewhere and give him $30 million over 5 years again. And but it is what it is. So anyways, February trade deadline should be pretty interesting. And then again in the summer, we should see some major movement. So that's it for today's video. Thanks for watching. I'm Wicked Deke. If you like the videos, go ahead and subscribe, because we'll be kicking them out all the time. Cheers.